Hey, how's it going? And today I'm going to show you or walk you through how to create your own custom built queue system so that you don't need to use the generic template. Then there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's not a perfect system. You still need to build in some fail-safe in here, but this is what it looks like. So if we go into start, and all I've got two buttons and a verse device, and the rest of this is in the code. So if I come over and hit this button, you'll see on the screen a color block comes in, and I hit it again and another one. It's literally a queue system. The first one in is the first one out, and you'll see in the left hand corner I can't go beyond 12 or it's going to get messed up. And then if I come over here and I hit E, I'm removing the elements. And it's a perfect system. The only thing is we need to build in a fail-safe so that I unsubscribe from the buttons once I get to the end of the queue. And other than that, it's pretty great. And I think this has a lot of application, and it's better than using the generic template in a lot of ways. So anyway, let's take a look at this in the code real fast. Just to look here on the scene, again, I have the two buttons and the verse device, and the buttons are paired. So this is all in the code, and it's kind of a lot to get your mind around, but basically the false values set the length of the array, and so we can't go beyond this. So we need to build in a fail-safe that would, so that the user can't go beyond this, because it gets messed up if you go beyond the length of the array. But this is a homemade queue system, first in, first out. The false values set the length of the array, which is 12. So we have a myQueue class, which contains our onQueue and our dequeue methods. And then we have a queue engine here that sets our UI. And then we have our creative device down here with our editable buttons. And we create an instance of the chat engine so that we can reference it. And it's important that the queue engine and the queue go above the verse device. So here is this part here, which is kind of a little tricky, but it basically takes in a color block. And you can use a text block, you can use anything you want for this. And then we have the for loop, and it basically keeps iterating through the array. So like right now it's all set to false, right? So all these can be converted to color blocks, right? So as we're pressing this, we can convert them to color blocks. So it keeps iterating through as long as it's finding color blocks, and it stops as soon as it finds a false slot. And then what it initializes that to is essentially a color block here, like that. So it puts a color block into whatever index position that it finds. Then we increase our queue starts out at 0, and then we increment it by 1. And here we just print out the queue size and the array length. And then once we find the first false open slot, essentially, then we jump out of the whole for loop right here. So this is kind of cool, some cool logic to kind of get your mind around. And then this is our dequeue, so this adds from basically the end of the line, right? It keeps adding from the end of the line. So here's our dequeue, which removes the first element in the array. And here we create these two variables at this scope level. They have to be at this scope level so that we can return this new block. And what's tricky about this is that our array is set with an option container with a color block type in it. But what we have to be able to return is just a regular color block, not a color block option type. So that gets a little tricky here. So what we do here is we call our array, get the element in the first position, assign it to element, and then we set this variable to the color block option type here. And then what we do here is we go ahead and remove that element. Here we identify it first, then we remove it, and we create an altered array. And then what we do is we unpack the block removed element and assign it to block unpacked here, right? So we unpack that. And then down here, these are all failable expressions. So then once we clear through this, get out of the woods here, then we do all this stuff here. So what we do here is we take our modified array and set our original array to that. So we update our array with the removed value. And then here, what we do here is we're essentially preserving the length of our array here. So we go ahead and, because we removed an element, now we want to go ahead and put a false element back in where our color block was. So the length of the array doesn't actually change. So that's what this all does here. And then here we get our queue size. And notice that our queue size is being set independently from the length of the array. So the length of the array never changes. The queue size is measured separately from that. We look like we're removing something, but we're not. We're just keeping the array the same size. So it's kind of slick in a way how this works. The queue is not the same as the actual array. The queue is something different from the array, but you can think of the queue as almost more like a tracking system, a separate tracking system, and the array just stays the same size. But it does change in terms of how many color blocks are in it at any given time. So there's all that stuff going on there. And then here is our queue engine. And here we create a reference to my queue because we do need to reference it. And let me jump down here. So this is our creative device part here. We have two @editable buttons. We create an instance of our chat engine so we can reference it. And then we have our two buttons that subscribe to two different functions down here. There's an add block that takes in the agent. And here basically we get the agent and get the player UI. And then once we get the player, the reference to the player, not the player UI, then we can go call the chat engine and create UI up here. So then it comes in up here, and then we create a canvas slot and set that. And we get the player UI and assign that widget to the UI. And then we have this add new block, and these are color blocks. And we put it in a stack box slot. So there's all this right here. And I have this here, but I just realized I don't need that. That was for something else I was messing around with. And here is where we delete our block and we reference my queue and we dequeue here. And then when we call this the dequeue, that's where this is important, where we get this new block return, because it returns a color block. So that's why we need this element returned to us, because then we actually need to remove it from the UI. So there's a difference between the array and the UI, and that's another reason why it can get confusing. So this kind of removes it from the queue, so to speak, but it doesn't remove it from the UI. We have to remove the widget. So we get the color block itself, and then we can delete it here on the remove widget, right? So that's the delete block. And so that's kind of the whole thing. And like I said, I think it works pretty well. The only issue is that we need to build in a unsubscribe function so we don't exceed the length of the array. And that would be easy enough to do, to build that logic into it. So anyway, that's all I had for today. I hope you found this interesting. Take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.